Welcome back to another After Dark episode here on the Iron Size Podcast. I'm here with Erik Grohmann of Modern Athlete Strength. Erik, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here.
Likewise. I had the good fortune of interviewing Jimmy. It feels like it was about 6, maybe it's been as long as 8 weeks ago now. We dug into the strength and conditioning path. We talked a lot about Modern Athlete Strength and what you guys are doing. And we were able to talk shop, which was fun, but what we ended up spending a lot of time talking about was just kind of maybe clearing up some misconception and clearing away some of the gray that exists for people on how they organize their strength and conditioning program. A lot around concurrent training, which is a lot of what I know Modern or Mass is doing with folks, and just to try to give people a little bit better perspective. And the opportunity came up for me to talk to the guy behind the nutrition side of this, and that's you. And I love talking nutrition. I often do it with my own crew here, in the studio, but talking to somebody that has had a little bit of a different journey and works with a very specific let's just say very specific populations, that's plural, of folks. I'm stoked to get into a few things with you and hopefully leave some people with some takeaways and some good actionable stuff to apply to their own place, wherever they are in their journey. That said, this podcast is about you, and what you're doing. So let's figure some of that stuff out. I want to hear about your journey because I don't know a lot about it. So you can start and stop wherever you want. You just might have to wait for the timeout signal or look out for the timeout signal because we're recording this remotely. So there's a little bit of a delay because I may want to go down a couple of roads here with you as you're going through your story, if that's cool.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll try to make it somewhat brief just so we can focus on the nutrition, but definitely I think my background plays a big role into how I coach. So growing up, I have always been somebody that is really into more adventurous type activities. So I grew up snowboarding at one point competitively. I've always been into hunting. So I'm from Wisconsin. So white-tailed deer hunting's always been a big part of my life. That led me to backpacking. Eventually, later in my life, I got into surfing. Now I'm doing ultra marathons. And all of these things, what they have in common, the thread that ties them all together is they're a little bit more extreme. They're more adventurous. And that has always really appealed to me. So when I was, 18, I wanted to join the Marine Corps. I had a really good friend. He was like 6 years older than me, and he was in the Marine Corps infantry, and he had already been out. I met him after he had left service, and he convinced me. He's like, "Look, man," he's like, "you can join the Marine Corps up to this age." He goes, "If I were in your shoes," he's like, I would try school out first. Like I'd go to college and just try it out. You can always stop and join the Marine Corps. He's like, "But give it a shot." He goes, "I wish I would have done that." So I really heeded that advice, and that's exactly what I did. So I went to University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, freshman declared as a nursing major. And my head as a nursing major was mostly like, hey man, like the male-female ratio in your classes is solid for you,
Okay.
So I wasn't really there for nursing, so to speak.
Gotcha.
And I was 18 and somebody that really liked to be outside and doing all of these hobbies. Not that I was bad at school. I was actually pretty good at school, but I didn't really have a passion for being in school or education at that time. I just didn't value it as much. My head was elsewhere. So after like a semester in nursing, I was like, yep, I got to my anatomy class. Semester 2, I was like, I'm not taking this because I can't afford to fail a class. I'm going to be a business major and figure it out later. And then really what that told me is, hey man, like your heart's still going into the military, being a Marine and doing all that. So went to the recruiter and I basically was probably the easiest recruit ever. I was like, look, man, I don't need the sales pitch. I want to join the Marine Corps. Like I'm here. Like, let's just make this happen. You can save all the little placards and all of that. Like I want to do it. So took my ASVAB, did pretty well. They asked me what I wanted to do. And they said, please don't say infantry because they've got slots to fill. And I scored decent and they wanted me to fill a different role. And I was like, look, if you can't give me an infantry contract, I can go next door to the Army and I'm sure they'll be happy to give me an infantry contract. So, they kind of chuckled and laughed it off. Needless to say, I got my infantry contract. The way I worked it out is I would finish one more year of school just to get some GEs out of the way. And then I'd ship off for boot camp after that second year of school. So that's what I did. And then, I did 4 years in the Marine Corps Infantry, which was a fantastic experience. It was definitely not the experience I had imagined. I mean, one of the big reasons I joined the infantry and the Marine Corps Infantry specifically is I was impacted by 9/11 and all of those things going on, and I really wanted to get in the fight. So to me, that was like the fast track to Afghanistan, right? I was like, just get me there, right? I want to get in that. And my Marine Corps career did not lead me there at all, which totally shocked me, especially as a young Marine. All of my deployments were on Muse. So we did the Pacific. We were in the Middle East for a little bit, but not Afghanistan. And, I just talked about this recently in a podcast, but at first that really was upsetting to me. You have that warrior's guilt that you weren't in combat, in the fight, being a real infantry Marine. But now that I'm older and I look back, I got to do some Marine Corps stuff that was really true to amphibious Marine Corps raider roots. So my first unit, we were a boat raid company. So our entire mission set was, raiding beaches on small rubber boats. And it was awesome, man. Like that's something that I look back on and I go, if I wasn't in the unit I was in, I probably never would have got to experience that side of the Marine Corps. And, there was a whole bunch of other experiences along those lines that were really unique and cool and great opportunities. And I learned so much that I still carry with me today. In fact, the Marine Corps and the things I learned, especially in the leadership schools like Squad Leader School or AIC when I went through, I use those principles in my coaching and I try to teach those principles to my clients, especially when it comes to planning. Because as I'm sure we'll get into, when it comes to your fitness or your nutrition especially, planning is so important. And it's little things that you don't think about that make the biggest impacts, in my opinion. So back to my story. So did the Marine Corps. I decided I was going to get out. At that point, I felt like I got what I needed. I didn't see going to combat in the future without maybe going to special operations. My life circumstances had changed at that point, being married and just having different objectives. So I ended my active service and I went back to school. At that point, I was really driven. I had a lot more discipline. So in my mind, I said, let's take what I'm best at in school academically, which would be math and science, and what's going to be a super high paying job, right? Because I know I can get through the schooling now. So I picked engineering. Like it just made sense to me. So I started as an engineering major and then made it 2 years in, did well, like A's in all my classes. But one day I was sitting in my statics class next to this young kid. He had to be like 18. And it was Monday. And I just asked him, I said, how was your weekend? And he goes, oh man, it was great. I learned how to program on CAD and I started on SolidWorks and using this Python program. And I just thought to myself, I say, you are going to be an awesome engineer, like an awesome engineer,
Right.
And then he said, how was your week? And I said, oh, it was great. Like hit my workout Saturday. I went to the beach and surfed. Like I did all the things I love doing. And then Sunday I meal prepped and I got ready for the week. And to me, that was an awesome weekend. And in that moment, that was my epiphany. I thought maybe I should do something that aligns with my passions opposed to just something that pays a high salary because I'll be a lot happier long-term. And that's when I made the shift. So I went straight to the counselor in my veteran center. And I was like, look, man, I want to change my major. He's like, what? So we went through that whole thing and I got on the nutrition course. And how I landed on nutrition specifically opposed to, let's say, like exercise physiology, because I was really torn. My passion is definitely fitness, which is two parts, right? There's obviously the athletic training part and the exercise phys part, but then there's the nutrition part as well. So that took me at least a couple days to really meditate on and come to the decision, which path do I want to follow in that space? My passion for food has been lifelong. And I don't mean just I like eating food, which I do clearly, but also the cooking and the science behind it and how that plays various roles in your athletic performance and your overall health outcomes. And that's how I ultimately decided that I was going to go the dietetics route to become a dietitian. So I did that, finished up my GEs. Then I finished my undergrad at Cal State Long Beach with nutrition and dietetics. Then I had the important decision of where do I want to do my residency or my internship. We were in California at the time, living in Huntington Beach, which I absolutely loved. I could surf all the time. Weather was great. Had a lot of friends. But our family's back home in Wisconsin. And when you're starting a career, you got to think ahead. If I'm going to go through this residency or internship, that's probably where I'm going to make my networking connections, so on and so forth. Where do we want to end up permanently? Do we want to stay here in Southern California, or do we want to move back home by family where it's a little cheaper to live and I can deer hunt again? That was big. So
no surfing there though, bro.
Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
No surfing there though, dude.
Well, actually, you'd be surprised. We can surf on the Great Lakes. So I do surf on Lake Michigan when we get a right wind. So obviously it's not as good, but it's better than nothing.
You're right. That qualifies, but it ain't Huntington Beach, dude.
It's better than nothing. And I can snowboard still, which is nice.
Yep.
So yeah, ultimately decided to do my residency there. Got accepted, luckily. Went through that residency. It was great. And then as soon as I finished that, I went and took my RD exam. So I passed, got my credentialing. And then I continued my education to get my master's degree in nutrition and dietetics, just because I was already in the mindset of school. I was like, let's push through now, because otherwise I probably won't want to do it later in life, especially, with kids and all that. So finished my graduate degree. And then my first job out of school was actually at the VA. So obviously being a veteran myself, like helping vets is near and dear to my heart. And I thought, what better place to do it than the VA? Unfortunately, what I learned really quickly at the VA is, although the mission is fantastic working with vets, a lot of the veterans you end up working with are much older, 50s in the younger ranges, and then 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, so on. And unfortunately, from a nutritional perspective, although the dietitians in the clinical sense can help tremendously, unfortunately, they're so far downstream, not that they still don't need the nutrition help, but my passion is upstream. I really would like to get to those veterans early, right? Maybe while they're still in service. So working with active military, active law enforcement, active firefighters in that tactical world, because the tactical world is what I cared about. And I want to make sure that those people, after doing something so selfless, they can actually enjoy the rest of their life without chronic kidney disease and heart failure, potentially cancers, things that nutrition can really play a big part in. I wanted to hit them early and do my best and do my part, which is a small part, a drop in the bucket, but it still counts, to avoid some of those negative health outcomes down the road. So the answer to that problem then was, unfortunately, parting ways with the VA, starting my own practice, and then just finding a way to work with all of these individuals in the world that I care most about. And that led me to my business, which is Grunt Grubb. And then Grunt Grubb led me to Modern Athlete. And it was a match made in heaven. I've got guys that are of the same mindset, of the same background. And that team is awesome. And working as a team is so much better than working as an individual. And I love that about Modern Athlete. And I get to work with all the people that I'm most passionate to work with. So that was a long-winded way of giving my background.
That's great. Man, I hadn't heard the story. So no, I appreciate that. And I think it's a really good setup. There's a couple things. I mean, so many things came up for me there. First off, the journey there of kind of where you were and how you did things and how you were making decisions and thinking you're moving in the right direction and having moments where you're like, no, I need to change, course here for various different reasons at different points in life. I think I can definitely relate to that, particularly in the institution of education. And I think probably a lot of other folks out there can relate too. So I think it's super relevant. Obviously, there are some pieces there that really fit together. Again, your time as an athlete, pre-Marine Corps, and the things that you've done and having experiences outside of the norm. And we can maybe talk a little bit about like research where it's happening, where a lot of the information that it ends up in people's, inboxes or in front of them on social media, where it's coming from and how relevant is it to where they are in their time and space, and the activities that they're involved in. I think that's a thing. The other part about that is obviously your connection to, working with folks in the space that you work in and having some level of experience and of your own and watching other people have those experiences. And then I think being an entrepreneur is a big deal. Like I have a high amount of respect for anybody that tries something as hard or as difficult as starting your own business on your own. And I also know what it feels like to find finally like your tribe. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, like all these years, all that stuff, all this, I'm not sure what's going on or what I'm going to do or how I'm going to make this work. And you meet you end up getting connected with a couple of people that have been there too, and they finally found they have like a vision that everybody can, and some goals and some values that everybody can latch onto and just force multiply. That's clear to me that that's what's happening in Modern Athlete, and that's why I was so stoked to talk to Jimmy in the first place. I've been watching, paying attention to you guys for quite some time now, and then you popped up on the radar. I'm like, dude, got to talk to this guy, because if he's inside that circle, there's going to be some real value out of any kind of a conversation that I can have, whether it's private or public. So anyway, those are kind of my takeaways.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Questions jumping in sort of to the path of education, and maybe helping the audience to differentiate that may not have an understanding of what the acronyms, right, mean, where the licensure kind of happens, without getting into the weeds or all the particulars. But basically, I guess I would say this, and we had a little conversation about social media before we switched on here, and that is basically now it seems that whatever you put in your Instagram profile bio, right, is what you are, right? Whatever that is. You can kind of put whatever you want there, right? And then however good your media content is, and, your marketing ability, and how how to manage the algorithm and get into Facebook ads or meta ads and all that other stuff dictates your success, right? How popular you get, how many likes, shares, follows, subscriptions, all these kind of things. And I think that's been, while it's been very powerful in a lot of good ways, right? There's also the availability of information, and people can kind of say whatever they want, confuses people, right? And they have to navigate through all this. So help them navigate like what a registered dietitian actually is, right? You kind of talked about you went through graduate school in order to get the level of, let's just say you got your papers, right? But how differentiate that between, somebody that's calling themselves a nutritionist, right? Or like a nutrition coach, because those are all very different things.
Absolutely. Well, a couple points you bring up there that I definitely want to talk about. I saw this the other day. I can't remember the wording exactly, but in essence, it said a lot of really good coaches that are well-versed in their field, be it athletic training or nutrition, have a really hard time as entrepreneurs because A, that's not their skill set. Their skill set is the trade that they're in. And then B, they're also limited by ethics at what they can say. So just a quick example in the nutrition space, right? I'm talking about things that are backed by evidence as much as I know to my knowledge, right? Like I only really ethically want to give advice that is backed by as much data as possible. Whereas somebody without that same ethical barrier, somebody that, let's say, just calls themselves a nutrition coach, if they're not bound to that same ethical code, they've got a lot more leniency at what they can say. They can say some off the wall shit. And
really? Because I hadn't heard any.
No one's going to come after them to take their credential. Right. And there's a lot of times where, especially in like nutritional science, there might be something that is very interesting. Like there's a new trend that came out and it might be promising, but it's so new that as a dietitian, without having a strong, backing of data and quality research, it's hard for me to give that recommendation. And I've got a way to kind of circumvent that, where I basically have this exact conversation with a client where I'm like, look, it looks promising. There's very little data. I mean, it might take years to get data where I would give it my stamp of approval. So what I really go down to is a risk assessment. Are there any really apparent risks, right? And if there are, then I really caution people to take that experimental approach. I'm all for people being pioneers with their body and doing whatever they want. I think that's how we find out stuff, right? I run into a problem when then people who are pioneers with their body start saying like, yep, this is the way, you should do this, because they don't have the educational background to be like, you're a study of N=1. That's meaningless, right? Your testimony's cool, but it doesn't mean that everyone should or needs to do that. So that's my little rant on what I've been seeing in my own struggles as a coach, where I'm so focused on nutrition. It's sometimes hard for me to focus on the business end where, but got bills to pay and all that. So I'm getting better.
I get it.
So the educational route, and I've got issues with the educational route, but I'm sure it's the same for every single career field, right? You go to school to get your baseline, your foundation, right? I wasn't expecting to leave my nutrition, my school for nutrition and be like, I know everything about nutrition now. I know everything about performance nutrition or clinical nutrition. I knew that whichever realm of nutrition I landed in, that's where the real learning and the blade gets sharpened. That's where it gets sharpened. Your blade is only forged in school. So for dietetics specifically, you start with your undergrad. So you get all your GEs out of the way and they start building up your scientific baseline. So I had to run through all the chemistry. So I had to do Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2, OChem 1, OChem 2, right? And then I had to take biochem. All of that just so I could take a class on human metabolism or advanced nutrition, because you need that chemistry foundation to understand those nutrition principles in depth. So you get all those classes out of the way, and then they start giving you classes in all the areas you could practice as a dietitian. So you go through clinical nutrition, you go through food service nutrition, you go through community nutrition. And to me, I already knew that eventually I wanted to end up in the performance space. I had a lot of interest in clinical, which is why the hospital appealed to me right out of school. So even though I had to take those classes that I knew I'd probably never end up in, I still kept an open mind, right? And although I don't use a lot of those skills now, and sure, you look back and you're like, oh, well, it was a wasted class.
Waste of time, yeah.
Unfortunately, just the way it is, right? And that's the way the dietetics profession is, because some dietitians do go into community and do go into food service. And the best part about it is, should I ever need to lat move into another field of nutrition with my credential, I can, because I have that same foundation that every other dietitian has. So you go through that. That proves that you got a piece of paper that says you went through a whole bunch of nutrition classes. Then they make you go through an internship, which is essentially a residency where you get supervised practice hours in all of those three realms: clinical, food service, community. And then once somebody signs another piece of paper saying they just did a whole bunch of hours in these places, then you sit down for a nationalized standard exam. And if you pass that, you get your credentials as a registered dietitian. That has since changed. And now the minimum education level is a graduate degree. So I technically got grandfathered in, but I knew that mandate was coming down, which is why I continued to pursue through my master's degree right away. Because should I ever need a job outside of the entrepreneurial space, it's good to have that to be competitive. Nonetheless, that is the minimum education now a registered dietitian needs. So it is not to say that every registered dietitian out there knows everything about nutrition, or they're an outstanding coach, or that they can't give bad information. And it's not to say that somebody that calls themselves a nutrition coach or is a nutritionist gives bad information. But as a generalized standard, you know what you're getting with a dietitian. You know that they have all had the same foundational education, and all of those scientific courses really matter when you're talking about how the body works and what foods you're going to put in your body. And they're bound by the same ethical code like I talked about previously. So if somebody has diabetes, they're going to give them proper advice, right? Opposed to just giving them the same cookie cutter nutrition plan that somebody else might. Somebody that doesn't have that clinical background, that scientific background. If you work with somebody with health problems, I mean, A, technically it's breaking the law, not that anybody enforces it, but B, it's just unethical. If you don't have the knowledge to really work with somebody like that, you shouldn't do it. But, that's where greed comes in, and people just want money, and it doesn't matter if they went through the schooling. If all they're focused on is getting as many followers as they can, selling as many products as they can, and making a living from that, even though the people that, they're pretending to be essentially had to go through all this schooling, all this trouble. They're just like cutting the line, writing it down. And I get that, I understand where their head's at. I just don't agree with it. But so that's the basic pipeline for a registered dietitian. And then from there, as you're a dietitian, you can continue to specialize. The Academy for Nutrition and Dietetics offers, further credentialing for performance nutrition, clinical nutrition, diabetes education, so on and so forth. So the education never stops. And just like a healthcare provider, we are required every year or every 5 years to have a certain amount of continuing education hours. And you can do that in any realm that you're passionate about. So at least, again, there's another standard for you as a professional to continue to keep your blade sharp so that you're extremely effective and up to date on the current research.
Yeah. That was a very good explanation, right? There's a lot of detail in that. And you mentioned it kind of up front, like this is the same in any profession, right? Where there's a credentialing a component to it, where there's going to be some good stuff in there and there's going to be some bad stuff. There's going to be some stuff where you're like, why are we even discussing this? And in that process, you might even be learning like, man, like I hear what you're telling me, but how old is this research? Like how long did it take for this research to make it into this textbook or into your lecture? When was the last time you studied, kind of thing? That's kind of like this, you're questioning things. At the same time, again, there is a standard of continually updating, and there's a requirement, as you said, in order to do that. So it does at some level force people to at least be put back into the, well, you mentioned it, and that is just continually being a student, right? And that comes through the again, like the continuing education credits that you're required to achieve on a regular basis, or certifications that you're required to retest for or reapply or whatever those things are, depending on your specialization and wherever you're going. Yeah, so I had a bit of an experience as a nutrition major myself. I was business, right? And then moved into nutrition. And where my challenge was much like yours, I think, in that I was not mature enough yet to, what I had was an inquisitive mind, and I had a lot of drive to know more. And again, going back to like Dunning-Kruger and things like that, we all go through that. Mm-hmm. But what I was also doing at the same time was working as a coach, as a personal trainer, right? That's kind of where I started in all of this, right? And I was recognizing that a lot of what was being discussed, and this is where I wasn't mature enough at the time to realize it. A lot of the things that were being discussed, go back to OChems, biochem, all of this stuff, I was like, I was in the front of the class with my hand up asking like, okay, so I hear what you're saying here about this concept and this particular application. And we were way too early into that process for me to even be asking the application thing. That is literally dude, you don't even understand what you don't know yet. Like, be patient, get through here. There's a purpose for this. But my frustration was like, I'm working with these people and they have these problems and I want to help them. I want to fix them, right? And that was frustrating for me. And when I was like persistent, and that persistence turned into, I think, maybe a perception that, I was a little bit too gung-ho or was challenging folks. And then there was me playing the game in my head of like, who is this person that's telling me this? How much real experience do they really have? Like, it appears they might even have an eating disorder, right? Like,
that's fair, very fair.
In the nutrition space, you often see this. People have had a problem. They've then sought information or help, and they've gotten that help. You see it in all kinds of places, in the personal training world, in the therapy world, all those kind of things, where they're like, oh, I was helped and I understand this better. I want to know more. And then they wind up becoming a therapist or a coach or whatever the case. They get into that profession. I've seen that happen a lot of times. And I think there's a lot of value in that, right? It's sometimes good, sometimes bad. You take a little bit of that. But my point was I was getting these opportunities in what I was doing to kind of advance, and I had to weigh out, like, do I stay in school or do I take this opportunity? And at that time, we're going back to the early 90s. Nutrition was a different thing then. Dietetics was a little bit a different thing. And all of the paths, for the most part, unless you went to some very specific universities, which I was never smart enough to get into anyways, we're putting you into the clinical track, right, to really work in a hospital environment. And I realized that really quickly, like, that is not where I want to be, much like you having some epiphanies. I do not want to work there. That's not I don't want to work with sick people. I want to work with people that are trying not to be sick, right? And I did understand how fitness and nutrition could keep people from doing that. My own personal physician was a ER physician for decades before he's finally like, I can't do this anymore, man. Like, I'm tired of putting Band-Aids on problems that could have likely been solved or avoided a long time ago if we got in front of this. So that's what he moved into. He moved into more like longevity medicine and helping people on an individual basis, so they didn't have to go to the emergency room or wind up in a doctor's office getting prescriptions for diabetes medication. My point is, there's a lot of different pathways, but this one is very specific. And so when people are out there taking advice or information, listening to who's giving it to them and knowing where they're coming from and their background, I think, is really important. And particularly in the tactical space, this gets a little gray, right? This gets a little murky. We're talking about fitness, we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about shooting, combatives, whatever it is that we're talking about, it gets a little murky. And you get some really big personalities that can get out there and start doing and saying things. And there may be a lot of truth in what they're saying through their own application or what they've seen happen in their very specific population, very specific, right? Of high achievers, like athletes, people that have been working out their whole life, right?
Right.
And making small adjustments can make in adopting an eating style, like planting your flag in some type of dietary tribe or whatever. And they saw a result from that. And to your point, like, this is the way. And then all of a sudden, where are all the other people that have found this way? And now there's this tribe and everybody's following it. And then it doesn't get murky at that point. It's like, it gets really sloppy and nasty. And then you got, then it becomes like religion, right? Like, I am carnivore, right? I am vegan, whatever the case, right?
Yep.
And so in my years, again, like, I kind of went down this different path where the institution of education wasn't really going to give me what I wanted at the time. And this was before the interwebs were what they are. And so what we were effectively doing was going out and seeking this from folks like you that had been through the process, were in practice, and were delivering very specific information on specific topics on, like 3 or 4 or 5 day workshops, seminars, educational things. And so I was just trying to soak all that up, right? And so that's when I learned how much I didn't know, right? and recognizing, like, there's a way, like, if I want a specific answer to this thing, here's who I go to for that, right?
Right. And that's an important skill.
100%. And that's when I learned early, that I feel very fortunate to have learned, only because of probably my own poor decision making, right? That landed me there. But like, if I want to talk to if I want advice on performance nutrition as a marathoner or ultra marathoner, you said ultras, right? So our coach,
yes,
one of our main coaches here is an ultra marathoner too. So we have a lot of talks about that stuff. I was heavy into the triathlon space for quite some time, for about 10 years. So we nerd out and we kind of go to that path. My point being is, if I want performance nutrition, right, for me as the ultra marathoner, am I going to go to the clinical RD, right, registered dietitian that works in the hospital with sick people all day long? That might be a good place to start, but I would hope that person, that professional, is referring them to somebody that they know that has more experience,
right,
like in that space, and recognizes what they might not know, right, because they haven't practiced it. And so again, just going back to unclouding the water, making it a little less murky, that was a good explanation. So let's talk about application. So you get out, you're working in all these different environments, and now you're with Modern Athlete. I want to hear who your clients are. Like, who's coming to you? Who are you working with now?
Yeah, we get a pretty broad range of clientele, but I'd say there's definitely an emphasis in the tactical world: firefighters, police officers, military personnel. But you also get the driven and motivated dad that works an office job, right? And he sees what Modern Athlete's doing. He's got the same moral compass and values, and he aligns with what Modern Athlete's doing and the tactical world. And he wants to, be his best self or her best self.
He's a man of action. He's a man of action, if we want to kind of summarize it, right?
Yeah. I feel like, and most people like that, and this is probably an overgeneralization, but this is who I am as a person. I see and view my physical fitness and my health as something that benefits not just myself, but it benefits my family. It benefits my localized community, and it benefits my nation, right? If every American could be, in that mindset of, I need to take care of myself because I need to stand ready at all times, and I need to be a good person, and I know that exercise is good for my mental health, and so on and so forth, I really think we'd have a better country. Now, I say it's an overgeneralization because I know not everyone's financial circumstances or their physical capabilities, maybe they were born with a disability, have the ability to, be somebody that looks like, Navy SEAL, Green Beret, Delta Force operator, so on and so forth, right? Somebody maybe you'd see in a movie. So I understand that. But if you do have the means to do so, I think it's your responsibility as a man or woman to be the best version of yourself. So
word.
So I digress. But yes, we work with people that align to that kind of mentality of being prepared, mentally, physically, spiritually, and nutrition and fitness is where we fit into that world to make them the best versions of themselves. So because of that, and because of modern athletes' background and my background, we do get a lot of military personnel because they know that we understand their world because that was our world or still is our world. And I think that makes all the difference sometimes because there are so many nuances in tactical professions, just like there are nuances in every single sport, right? So having done that sport, like one of the reasons I got into ultramarathon running is because I just wanted to mess with my nutrition and take a super extreme physical event. I just picked ultramarathoning, but to your point, triathlons are a very extreme physical event. Take a very extreme physical event and push your body to the limit and see how nutrition really plays a role in that, what works, what doesn't work, so on and so forth. So then I can take my educational background and my research in the space, apply it, see how it unfolds for me. Mm-hmm. And that helps me relate, to find friction points, to understand the struggle. And that's really, I think, where I come in as a coach, because you can go online, especially now with ChatGPT and all of this AI, and you can get a meal plan, or you can ask ChatGPT to give you some general nutrition advice. And half the time it's not bad, right? But being able to read a textbook and get all of this fancy science and all of these numbers, that's one thing. Learning how to apply that to your situation as a law enforcement officer with 3 kids at home, right? That is a much different situation, because we can't all be professional athletes that have a chef on staff that's making us all of these meals, right? And have the financial ability to train for 7 hours a day and blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. Most of us are working a 9 to 5, even in the tactical space, right? Or more. You're working a job, whether it's physical or not. You're bound by that restraint, those left and right lateral limits. And then you've got a life outside of that. You got to be a dad to your kids, and you got to be a husband to your wife, right? Or vice versa, right? A wife to your husband. So that is where I come in as a coach, and I teach application. So to your point about, yes, if I'm looking for performance advice, I probably wouldn't go to a clinical dietitian. I would go to a performance dietitian, and you would hope that that performance dietitian, if they didn't feel comfortable in that specific area of sport or work, that they would refer you to a colleague or somebody that is more specialized.
Yeah. So again, I wanted you to walk through that, because that's what I understood from Jimmy when I was talking to him. And that is that this is a broad spectrum of people. And a lot of what you hear is, and I think I'm hearing some testimonials and seeing some testimonials from people that are in the military or in law enforcement or in the fire service, EMS, something like that. But you're working with a broad population because you can, and those people gravitate towards, again, something that I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but this is my takeaway from it. There are core values, right, that they are aligned with. So there's values and alignment with what it is that you're doing and where it is that you're coming from. And I think that's critical to client and business success, right, when with regard to working with people. And I think there's a large mistake, or there are many mistakes being made by the consumer in not thinking about that first, just looking for the answer to the test, so to speak, and not trying to first understand who they are working with, right? Who is this? Is this even somebody that I can align, my core values with, right? And because they may have some really good information in their head, but when things get tough and they're gonna, right, and that nuance pops up, which is an absolute, it's going to happen. It's a moment, right? There's a moment that happens, and they need to hear the truth, or they need to be held accountable, or sometimes that a person needs to put their arm around them. They have that trust and they have that connection with that person, that this person is literally giving me like the truth. Like, this is what is right. This is a me problem, right? This isn't a plan problem. This is me not executing the plan properly. Or, I'm running into a roadblock here, and this is a mental roadblock. It's an emotional roadblock. It's a financial roadblock, whatever those things are. Working with somebody that not just knows what they're doing on the technical side of things, but knows who the person is or who their client is. That's what I got from Jimmy, that there is a connection there. And part of that is because of the interface that you guys have with your clients and how you operate there. People can go back and listen to that podcast on the things that you guys are doing to do that. Again, that comes from the coaching perspective. And that's been like a theme on this show and all the spaces, all the genres with the people that are being really successful is they have relationships with their clients. So if training, and I think training is kind of more well-known. When I say training, let's talk about the physical aspects of that. Where we're training for strength, power, speed, capacity or whatever. God, there's so much information out there that you mentioned like ChatGPT or whatever. You can dump it in there and you can get a pretty good plan, right? It may not be specific to you, but there's a lot of information out there and it's kind of almost conventional wisdom to some extent. There's a little bit of bro science and then there's a little bit of research science and people have kind of brought those together to make it consumable and digestible and usable, right? And it works, right? And that's the thing about physical training, specifically even like with resistance training, doesn't matter where you are in your life, how old you are, how young you are, whatever, resistance training is going to provide a result. But it's still a little bit difficult, right, to get somebody the ultimate result that they want, particularly as they get on in their life with all the liability, maybe is the term that they have, as well as their training age and anything else they're bringing to the table in terms of the nuance that they bring, right?
Yep.
Injuries, limitations,
levels, previous injury,
all of those things. So I say all that to say is just to kind of put it out there for the audience that I really appreciate that. But I think as we get into this a little deeper into the application, it's like, okay, so those are the folks that you're working with, right? And they're coming from a common place, right? There's some connection there. So the next question then in all this is, what are the common issues? Whether this is the elite warfighter, right? Yeah. Or the CEO of his own company, whatever else, the driven dad, husband, right? Business owner who just wants to be a better version of himself and is trying his best to do that. What are the common challenges that you run into on the nutrition side specific to the whole?
Yeah. So there's common knowledge gaps, right? And misconceptions. And then there's application friction points. So the knowledge gaps, and we can dive into this maybe after this whole point is covered, but knowledge gaps are typically carbohydrates, their role in performance, how much to be consuming, so on and so forth. And then anything past macronutrients. So a lot of guys and gals that we have coming in are what I consider to be very overly macrocentric. Okay. So maybe they're coming from a place traditionally of where physique was more important than performance. Like any 18-year-old kid or athlete, they want to look good. They want to look like, Hugh Jackman and Wolverine. So they're eating chicken breast and white rice and maybe some broccoli. And they're doing that 3 times a day, 7 days a week, right? To get that physique. And that's easy because you can measure it and track it. And it's super simple. And it gives you numbers, so you know how to stay on track. But how many micronutrients are you getting? Are you getting enough zinc, magnesium, calcium, phosphorus? Are you getting enough electrolytes, right? And that's the micronutrients. That would be a more microcentric, nutrient-dense food approach to nutrition. And that's typically where the knowledge gap exists. And then, of course, there's knowledge gaps in supplement use and hydration and even nutrient timing, even though that's focus mostly on macronutrients, when to properly eat, what type of macronutrient to eat, why and when, that is a knowledge gap. But more so, the friction points that I deal with clients are, how do I take the information once you give it to me and actually apply it to my life? So I'd say the biggest one is always going to be time and planning. Yep. Because we're all busy people, especially in today's world. Everyone's got a side hustle, working 2 jobs. Their spouse might be working, right? It's just like there's never enough time in a day to do all the things that we want to do, right? Especially with social media in the mix, where it's like, oh man, like I should be training harder, or I should be shooting more, or I need to do jujitsu, but I also need to do Muay Thai. And then, oh man, I got to go on a mountain climbing trip too. And I should be back country hunting so I can provide my family with the best meat. And then after that, it's like,
I want to go surf.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And we're all in the same boat, essentially, where it's, you want to do all these things because, again, we're all driven individuals that want to be the best versions of ourselves. And now we are just slammed with a fire hose of information on how to be even better, a better version of yourself.
And we suck if we're not doing. Yeah, we suck if we're not doing it. What, you mean you're not cold plunging every day, or you're not,
Yeah.
you're not
Your
journaling
morning
every day?
routine's not 6 hours long.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and that's the reality, right? Is like a lot of performance nutrition is given to athletes, college athletes, professional athletes, and their situation is typically a lot different than a tactical athlete that is working crazy hours in austere conditions, very unique conditions. And that all has to be taken into consideration. But for everybody, right? Operator, law enforcement officer, firefighter, dad, time becomes an issue. When are we going to have time to do all the things we need to do nutritionally to stay on track? So military personnel that are reliant on the military for their food, so whether they're deployed out in the field and they're relying on MREs or UGREs or the chow that's provided on a ship, or you're a law enforcement officer, operating out of a cooler, or a firefighter on call for like 6 hours, right? There's no refrigerator on the truck. All of those things need to be taken into unique consideration, and then a plan around each of those circumstances needs to be developed. Now, the framework is different, the framework is pretty much the same for everybody, but the nuances of that framework then become what's individualized to that person. So we can take the same broad conventional wisdom, to put it in your words, enter it into this pretty generic framework of planning. And I mean, it's no secret, being a Marine, I use OSMEAC, right? 5-paragraph order, like mission writing process, because it really helps you think about your nutrition long-term. Then we can start talking about what's unique to your job specifically that might be different than, a stay-at-home dad or somebody working in a corporate setting, so on and so forth. And that's where the magic happens. And so to go back to the planning process, if you can just think ahead, even a single day, right? What's my tomorrow going to look like? And how can my nutrition look tomorrow based on what I have planned? If you could just do that, just one day ahead, the impact it will have will be profound. But most people don't think about their nutrition one day ahead, right? They think about their nutrition when they're hungry. It's like, oh man, like I've been so busy doing all of these things, I forgot to eat. Or, I prioritized all of this and not my nutrition. So now I have to rely on whatever fast food restaurant is in my local area. I'm on patrol. It's midnight. No healthy restaurants are open. What's open? I've got a 7-Eleven, I've got a McDonald's, and how can I now, I didn't plan. How can I now at least mitigate damage at a convenience store or a fast food restaurant? And that's where the basics of nutrition come into play. So again, same framework, same principles, different application.
Yeah. So, man, there's so much stuff in there. Obviously, I think when I go back to it, and you mentioned a few things there, like macro versus micro. And, you mentioned you mentioned one of those, that being carbohydrates, and we'll get into that because I really want to talk about that one. But the way I kind of look at this and I try to get people to understand is what are the bigger rocks that we need to move, right? To get started. A lot of people want to dive into the detail, and just taking it back just one step with regard to the planning process and the fitness versus the nutrition side, and that they absolutely have to work together to get the result, the performance result, if that's what your goal is, or aesthetic result, or longevity result for that matter. And that's, again, keeping your frameworks, I look at it in a triangle. You're always trying to achieve all of those things at one time, but sometimes, or oftentimes, particularly with the population you're working with, there's a focus to one of them. And it's going to be the same here in my gym with folks. Most of the goals here are longevity goals. I need to be a healthier version of myself first, right? And if we're chasing that, generally some level of performance, right, and some level of aesthetic change will come. If it shifts to aesthetics, something else may suffer a little bit. Maybe your performance goal is going to go down a little bit. Maybe doing this long term in terms of the longevity doesn't get you the direction you really want to go. But for a period of time, we can do this. And just know that this is not a great long term plan, right?
Right.
And what are the other things in that triangle we got to work on? So I look at those as those are big rocks. First off, what's our goal? What are we trying to achieve here? or what's appropriate for you, or what's mandatory for you, kind of thing. Maybe even look at it that way. Then the next thing is like, okay, to your point, how do you break this down? Going back to the conventional wisdom. Well, with workouts, right, I know that if I do this little plan, right, and I give my body this stimulus for an hour, 3 or 4 days a week, right, that it's going to, I'm going to be moving the needle somehow. And there's easy adjustments to make. Like in that hour, if I put another 2 kilos on this bar, right, it's going to give me a little bit more stimulus, and I'll probably get a little bit more result from there. And so I just add more weight, right, add load, right? That's the answer to the strength question or the power question or whatever else. And that's 1 hour out of a day. But the nutrition is 24 hours out of the day. So that plan becomes that much more critical, right? So again, then going back to the big rocks, like getting people to understand like caloric intake, what macronutrient profiles, and how those things impact all the little things that they oftentimes want to dive into. Like, what supplements should I be taking? Time out for a second. Time out. Like, let's talk about, your overall caloric intake and what makes that up. And specifically, are you eating enough, right? As a criteria for any kind of performance or health result, are you eating enough? And if you're not, what are the impacts of that? Let's just start with that, right? And, if you're not eating enough, like micronutrients are obviously going to be an issue, right? Because if you're underfed, you're going to have a lack of nutrition, right? You're going to have a lack of those micronutrients, and thereby, if not eating enough means you're undernourished. And if you're undernourished and expect a good longevity, aesthetics, or performance result, well, you're already working yourself out of a pretty big hole here. So we've got to focus on these bigger rocks, right? And once we kind of get those under control, then the nuance really dips in. But man, that's a lot of work for people. That's a lot of work for people, right?
Absolutely. And one thing that always I come back to is that there is no way around the fact that it takes discipline, and it takes a substantial amount of discipline to apply the principles properly. There is no easy way about it. You need to be consistent, and it's just like training, right? You got to get in there. You got to get that training in. Same with your diet, right? Just because you crushed it Monday through Friday doesn't mean you can completely go off the rails Saturday and Sunday and expect to stay on track. So having that discipline is so important. I'd say back to your point about moving big rocks nutritionally and starting with the basics, right? Yeah, absolutely. Undereating is a very common trend because people, even though they think they're performance focused, if they really ask themselves deep down, it's almost like they're more aesthetically focused. And because of that, the way they approach food is, I should eat less of that. I shouldn't eat that, or I don't want to do that because I'm going to get fat. I'm going to get fat. I wanted to make it my catchphrase, my slogan for a long time, that you can eat like a fat kid and still lose weight. Because oftentimes some of the feedback I get is, I can't believe how much I'm eating, and the weight is slowly coming off the way we talked about, slow and controlled the way it should. Yet my performance is still untouched, or my performance is even better than it was. And that's really important. And that is where taking the principles of things like how to balance a plate, how to eat the proper distributions of macronutrients throughout the day, all come into play. And then little things like fiber is often overlooked, right? People do not think enough about fiber. And fiber is so important for us. Because that is typically your fibers, fruits and vegetables and whole grains, nuts and seeds, things like that. So you're getting a lot of your micronutrition from, right? It's vitamins, minerals, so on and so forth. And take a step back. The analogy I often use with clients when it comes to micronutrients is you need to think of your body as a machine. I typically use a car for my example. Your macronutrients are going to be your fuel source, gasoline, diesel, whatever it is. Your micronutrients are all the parts and pieces along that system that help the engine combust the fuel source, right? It is your spark plugs, your fuel filters, your hoses and lines and fans, your alternator. So if you are under consuming the right foods and under consuming those micronutrients, your body's still going to survive, right? Because the human body is an amazing thing, but it will absolutely not be surviving in an optimal way or its most effective way and efficient way. And that's where all those little nuances come into play. And it's important to balance those plates out. So now you're eating all these fibrous foods that typically are a lot lower in calories, right? Like carrots and broccoli and beans and things like that. You're getting all that color as part of the plate. Well, you're getting the fiber in, which helps you feel full. You're also getting the vitamins and minerals in. Now the rest of your plate, your starchy carbohydrates and your protein are in the proper proportions. So you're feeling full. You got a proper amount of protein, fat, and fiber. All three things make you feel full for a longer period of time. So you're not eating or feeling hungry every hour and then like going through this like mental hurdle of like, oh, I'm hungry, but I just ate an hour ago or blah, blah, blah. You're eating the amount you should be eating, you're fueling your body properly, and your body rewards you with performing how it should. And then if you do that enough and consistently over time, this takes months, years, you get to the ultimate objective. And then you have to maintain that objective once you reach it, which again, especially in our culture, is really difficult for people because everything in our culture seems to be start and stop. I've got a 30-day diet challenge, or I got to reach this weight, and then I made it. And it's like they just think it'll just stay that way without making or maintaining any of the changes they made. So my approach as a coach is really slow, and I encourage everybody I work with right out of the gate. You have to understand that this process is going to be slow. We're going to be making huge shifts. They seem like little changes, but these are huge habits that you need to change permanently, because this isn't a 30-day diet. This is not 75 hard. This is now until the time you die. That is your nutritional journey. So we start slow, because if you start too fast and you have people change everything, and that's why diets fail, because people change so much at once, it's just unsustainable. The best diet in the world is the one that you can maintain forever, indefinitely. So we start small, right? When I start with clients, we work on balancing a plate. And the acronym for that is PCC, protein, carbs, color. Okay. That gives you the proper distribution of protein, starchy carbohydrates, depending on your activity level for the day, light training, moderate training, heavy training, and then all of your colorful fruits and vegetables to give you all of that fiber and some added micronutrition. Once we get the balance down, right, and we get numbers correct, we spend a lot of time determining maintenance calories, right? What are your maintenance calories? Let's find that out. It's going to be a give and take process, right? Some troubleshooting involved. Once we get that down, you know that you're hitting that number consistently, your distributions are right. Now, finally,
we twisting dials and toggling switches.
Yeah. Now we can do the sexy stuff, right? Now we can start tweaking things and giving you those edges. But until that, it's like any career, especially in the tactical space, you have to master the basics first. Before you start taking a supplement, before you start trying a sexy nutrition strategy, you have to understand conceptually and apply consistently the basics if you wish to be successful long-term.
Yeah. So I think there's a theme here. Again, just going back to other interviews, other folks I talk with, and that is that people often handle things in silos. So for folks in the tactical space, this might resonate, and that is particularly if you're in law enforcement, maybe the military. I'm more familiar with law enforcement, and that being the discussion about handling training in silos. And I think a lot of people try to handle their nutrition in silos too, where they're trying to pull this thing together over here as if it's the solution to the problem. Right? Like if I do this really well, I will fix my problem. Whatever that is, again, whatever the goal is, whatever thing we're trying to acquire here. And without having a deep understanding, again, of the concept, right? From the base level and then working your way back up. And the base level is like, okay, I understand what it is. Let me try it. Now I've tried it. I've had some experience doing it. And I figure out, okay, now I've had some experience doing it and I'm not as good as I want to be at this. Then learning how to diagnose what it is that I need to do in order to adjust. So I'm talking about shooting as an example, right? Like I understand what I'm supposed to be doing. There's this thing about grip, stability, trigger, all this, whatever, sight picture, however you want to go about talking about. But do I actually know do I know what I'm doing? Do I know why what's on paper down there is what it is? Like, it's not what I want it to be. So how do I reverse engineer this and figure out what do I need to adjust to do that? And that's very personal. There is no one size fits all, right? So it's, you have to figure it out. And through that process, now you have a deeper understanding of the switches and the dials and where I can go to the next thing. But then it goes like, now how do I put this together? That's a whole other process, right? So again, like, again, taking to the law enforcement side of this, like, then we have defensive tactics, right? Or combatives, right? And so we go in the mat room for that, but we're out on the range for the firearms training. At what point do we bring the two together? Because most of what we see happening on body-worn cam footage and whatnot is those two worlds collide. At what point did I ever put the two concepts that I may understand really well? Maybe I understand this one way better than the other one at a much deeper level, and I understand all those things, but this one, I only understand the foundational concepts. I don't really understand how to put it together. And part of putting it together, the ultimate, to your point, is putting them all together so you understand how to do it in different environments, deployments, right? The midnight shift, right? The vacation, right? The downtime, whatever it is. How do I now make all this stuff work for me? And you going back to your acronym, the PCC, it's interesting what people will do, the behaviors that they'll engage in with regard to doing two things. It's either putting more on the plate or taking something off. And the interesting thing about the PCC acronym is, and this is a little bit preloaded because we talked about this before, but they end up pulling one of those off and it ends up impacting the other one too, right? So you're not just pulling carbohydrates off. They don't realize what they're also doing is they're pulling off that third C, right? As a result, by default, they do that. And now they're underfed and they're undernourished. And they may have gotten an aesthetic result for a period of time. It worked for a minute until it didn't work anymore. And now they're grasping. And again, behaviors and human psychology drives people to make some really what I would consider weird decisions. But at the same time, they're very natural. They're very common. So let's talk about that, like particularly on the carbohydrate side and the misconceptions, the villainization of that macronutrient, and what you see people doing that are highly driven, very well read, seem to have it all together, got the discipline, right? Got their plan in place, yet they struggle with this one. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So across the board, I think athletic individuals oftentimes overemphasize protein. That is the one macronutrient that they are so focused on getting. And it's not to say that protein is not of vital importance. In fact, it's the only macronutrient you cannot live without because it gives you nitrogen. So protein is super important. But in this world with these protein blinders on, where all we're focused on in protein, we have all these other very important pieces of your nutrition that are just being completely left out. So carbohydrate specifically is the macronutrient that most people I work with typically tend to completely underconsume. And I really think this is entirely because of what people see on the news and what people see on social media. And I talk about this a lot with clients. A lot of times there will be a study that comes out, okay? The population of the study was average people, right? Which in America, unfortunately, means most likely sedentary people, okay? So they're probably overweight. They don't exercise like most of the people we work with exercise. And a study comes out that says, oh, well, if this person, reduced their simple carbohydrate intake, here were the positive outcomes. Well, now that study gets regurgitated into some clickbaity title that people click on for views. And then some influencer, some person that's maybe a nutrition coach or, whatever, somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing goes, look, I've been saying it for years. Carbs are the enemy and sugar is evil.
Yeah, I've been validated. Yeah.
We just love putting titles on food. That's a good food. That's a bad food, right? Without actually understanding what good or bad even means, why somebody would call it good or bad. And carbohydrates are definitely that, right? Well, I know that carbs are sugar, and I know that sugar gives you diabetes and makes you fat, right? And it's not the understanding that, okay, well, being sedentary and eating far too many carbohydrates that are highly refined over a period of time can potentially give me diabetes, and that consuming any macronutrient in excess can give me fat, right? So yeah, they're not wrong. Carbohydrates could lead to diabetes, right? When it's just like saying salt can kill you. If you eat too much salt, it can kill you. One of my favorite nutritional phrases is the dose is the poison.
Yep.
And understanding that these foods come in various forms to be eaten in certain amounts is really important. So when it comes to carbohydrates, athletes, I think, don't realize that it is our body's preferred fuel source. Our brain can only function on two things, glucose or ketones, right? Our body prefers the metabolic pathway for carbohydrates. That is just physiology, unfortunately, especially in the world of performance. And the why that's especially true in the world of performance is done typically at high intensities, right? We are working our body at a high capacity. Because of that, oxygen becomes lower in availability. Well, the metabolic pathway to convert carbohydrates to actual usable energy is more efficient and requires less oxygen than fat, which is why if you look at any top tier athlete, there of course are exceptions always, but the vast majority of elite Olympic level athletes, if you look at what is on their plate throughout a day, you are going to see a bunch of carbohydrates.
Tons.
So
shocking amount for probably most people. A shocking amount for likely most people looking at it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that athlete's eating this or that. And there's a reason for that. So what I always say is, if there was a better alternative to carbohydrates for energy for performance, you would see all these elite level athletes doing it. I mean, think about how much money is invested into an NFL team or a professional Olympic athlete, right? They're doing everything they can, backed by science, to get this person to win every time. And because of that, to me, that is a great if you're going to take a preliminary glance at something, that would be a really good indicator that what they're doing might be, something right I should also be paying attention to. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Yeah. So carbohydrates, the body's preferred fuel source, especially for performance. And then you take it a step further and you start talking about nutrient timing and different types of carbohydrates, right? So with my clients, I often dive into refined carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. And I always start heavy on education, right? And this is where my background comes into play. I want you to understand what a monosaccharide is: glucose, fructose, galactose. And I want you to understand that that's a simple sugar. And when you eat carbohydrates, eventually it's going to get broken down into that simple sugar. So depending how big or complex the carbohydrate source you're eating is, that may or may not impact how it's digested and how long it's going to take to digest. Because if you're going to use carbohydrate to fuel your training, depending how much time you have between eating and exercise, it's going to impact the food choice that you have. If you have 30 minutes or less to consume something and expect your body to run it through your stomach, into your intestines, into your bloodstream, into working muscle tissue, it needs to be something that digests really quickly. That's typically something like added sugar, right? Or refined carbohydrates. A common example I use is like white bread and honey.
Yep.
So, or Gatorade, right? Which just uses added sugar, which again is demonized. I can find countless examples online about, oh, well, you don't want that because it's got added sugar. Yes. If it's 9 p.m., you haven't lifted a finger all day, and all you're planning to do that night is binge watch Game of Thrones, you probably don't need a Gatorade. But if you're about to go into an hour-long high-intensity workout, you're going to need more than a Gatorade in terms of carbohydrate usage, right? That is the perfect fuel source. Now, I will add and go down one small scientific rabbit hole because I think it's really important for people to understand. Our body clears glucose out of our bloodstream two ways. The way that most people are familiar with is insulin, right? And when that system gets overused and over-relied upon, that system wears out like any machine. That is what can lead to insulin resistance and diabetes. But there is another way that our body clears glucose from the bloodstream, and that is physical activity, right? So when you are exercising and moving your body will clear that glucose completely independent of insulin, right? And I think once athletes grasp that concept, the fear starts to go away, right? Just like when an athlete grasps the concept of, oh, if I consume too much protein, it can lead to me gaining fat. Or if I consume too much fat, it can lead to me gaining fat. That's another one of those big rocks that once it gets moved, right, you can kind of start to see the big picture. So that's kind of my initial approach with carbohydrates is teaching the basics of what a simple sugar is and a complex carb versus a simple carb, and then how to apply that information to their given situation. Maybe they don't have access to a toaster to make white bread and, let's say, honey, right? Maybe they're out and they're going to do, they're going to serve a warrant and they're going to be waiting there for like 6 hours, right? Well, then what can you keep in your cargo pocket that's going to be like a good source of carbohydrate to keep you fueled up so that when you hit, you are absolutely fully prepared, you're fueled up, and you're ready to go. It's things like that that make a difference. And that's where the fun foods, right? You kind of get a little treat to yourself. You can start eating something that comes in a package and also not feeling so guilty about doing so, because you're doing it with a very, you're not going to your kid's cupboard to grab a Rice Krispie treat just because, it's going to taste good. You've got that Rice Krispie treat in your cargo pocket because you're about to do some freaking work and you're going to need to execute some violence and you're going to need to be absolutely at your best in doing so. And that carbohydrate is going to fuel your body to power through whatever it is you're about to do. So it's tips and tricks like that really go a long way. And understanding the basics, again, is so important, or why it's so important.
Yeah, the upside to that one too is that's the most abundant and available at all the places at midnight at, whatever time of day. Like that's your gas station food. I mean, there's no shortage of that when you walk in there, man. You can find anything. And obviously you need to make an informed decision, but at the same time, like you don't have to worry about it. I love what you said there about being overly focused on protein, because it's an interesting one. You have to be careful when you're communicating this to clients, right? Because you said it, and that is it's vital. You have to have it, and you need to get enough of it, right? So going back to the under eating calories and where are you on the protein scale? The one thing, like people are like, oh, I know it's one of two things. Oh, I get plenty of protein, and they don't. Actually, it's three things. They either say like I get plenty of protein, and they're not, or they get plenty of protein and they're not consuming carbohydrate, right? Enter carnivore diet, right? And they're trying to perform, and they're trying to lose body fat or whatever else, and they're not understanding this. Like, but what about the gluconeogenesis? Like what about Eric? Like what about how your body can turn protein into carbohydrate or whatnot? And then it's a very easy conversation if you understand the foundations of the fundamentals, going back to how that glucose or how that glucose gets in your bloodstream and where and when you need it. And is that really what you want to be doing, right? In order to perform at your best. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we could talk about that all day long. It's not that I hate carnivore. I think it's probably a good decision for probably a large population of our country that doesn't work out, right? That doesn't do things. Maybe it's a good thing for a while, right? To get that insulin sensitivity back. I don't know. I'm not going to make an absolute statement and say that it's the best. That's for sure. I'm not a huge fan for a lot of reasons. Mostly because, again, the flag planting and how it takes people completely off track from the rest of the fundamentals. Keeping in mind that your fitness and nutrition success are not solely about the food that you put in your mouth, like the food that you eat. There's so many of these other factors that you're picking up here. But I guess going back to the protein thing, that being the other one is they have no idea what they're eating. They think they're getting enough, but they're not. They're not saying like, no, I get plenty, and they're not. Or they're overeating. It's like, no, I do good on my protein. Oh, do you? Well, what does that mean? Like,
Let's see it.
Tell me. Yeah, show me.
That's where dietary recall comes in.
Right. And so, and then people go, oh man, I got to write down my food. It's so much work, right? Like, really, man? And these are the same people that can tell you everything there is to know about whatever. And let's talk about your space. Like, you want to talk guns, right? You want to talk firearms, right? They can tell you every detail about what went into that rifle, right? Why they chose each particular thing, where it's placed, where the things on the rail are placed, why they chose the optic they placed, why they changed the trigger out, why they did this, what ammo they use, what their freaking dope is on their gun, all these different things. And and they write it down and they record it and they put it in a ballistic calculator and it's stored in their, in their devices and whatever else. And then you ask them to track their protein, or track their caloric intake and their macro intake for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And it's like, it's the end of the world for them. I think that's an interesting point. And then when they do that, right, and you can actually get somebody doing that, then there's like this, like, oh my God, I had no idea. And there's a little bit of an oh my God for the client, but there's also for the coach going, a lot of times there's, what they want to say has been validated. They haven't actually said it. Like,
right.
I knew this was happening. I actually didn't need you to track to know some of this stuff. But now that I have this data and you have this data, now we can get to work, right?
Absolutely.
Now we can get to work and we can start doing stuff. And if we again handle the foundational or the big rocks first, let's get you enough calories first. And again, going back to protein, it's like, hey, if you're way under eating your protein, let's start to tick that up. That's going to add to the caloric intake, right? And it gets getting you closer to whatever your need is. And it's not mysterious to me, but it is to other folks that, your clients oftentimes those other things kind of fall into place, right? The carbohydrates, the fats, the macronutrients kind of fall into place. And then we can start twisting dials and toggling switches and do some of the sexy stuff. And I think there's been a huge improvement, right, in people's protein intake. They recognize it's an important one. They're probably not eating enough, but it's more about taking a harder look at the plate of food that's sitting in front of them, like, where am I getting these things from? And again, they want to dig deep into the weeds, I guess, or get deep into the weeds on all the little things that have to happen, but they're not recognizing, that those fundamentals. And if you can just get these things under control, I'm telling you, your life will change, right? You'll sleep better. You'll get better performance. Like, the body fat will come down. That will be the results that you're looking for. And going back to the time that you were talking about, this takes time. Yeah, I need you to, whatever. I don't know if you're asking people to track, but if you're tracking, like, let's track for the next 10 days. Yeah. Let's just see what's out there, man. Just dump it in there. You don't have to just put it in there, right? Let's see where it's at. So that's 10 days in, and I haven't lost any fat yet, right? And I haven't taken a minute off my 1.5 mile time yet. Like, no, dude, we're not there yet. This is a process. Like, that this first 30 days is a lot of, like, kind of like discovery. And then we can spend the next 30 days maybe starting to untangle the sticky web that you've landed in. And that's what makes nutrition coaching, folks, a little bit more difficult than I think the fitness, or performance side of things when it comes to the workout side, because that makes way more sense to them. I do the thing, right? For the hour, I get the result, right? Or I can feel it, right? Like, immediately, like, I'm sore the next day, like, validated, right? I got sweaty today, validated, right? Like, I've seen my weights go up, right? Or my loads go up on my lifts, validated, like, this works. Versus nutrition, which it's just like the fitness side of things. This is what I try to get through people's heads, is like, the physiological stuff always precedes the physical stuff. Like, you mentioned, and again, like, people don't want to hear the science. Like, dude, I just want to work out, bro. Or just tell me what to do here with the nutrition. Just tell me exactly what to eat and when to eat it, and I'll do that. And it doesn't work that way. Like, I've seen very few people be long-term successful with that. Getting
I'm
the
a huge
diet.
believer in that. You gotta have the education and understanding if you want to be successful long-term.
100%. It's not, and it's a difficult, obstacle to overcome for people for them. And again, when you work with high achievers, like, sometimes they want to know everything, and you have to kind of pull the throttle back a little bit. Look, dude, I get it. Like, I'm stoked that you're stoked, but let's just do this for a while, right? And then we can make some adjustments. And then what I want you to understand is why you're making it, and to make you independent so you can see things ahead of time. And that only happens with the plan, circling all the way back. Like, where are we trying to get to, and what are our milestones, and how will we know when to put more weight on the bar? Right? How will we know when to pull back the dial? How will we know to maybe go through a cut if that's what you're trying to do, or, refeed if that's what you're trying to do? All the things that they hear people talking about, and the magic that exists in nutrition, which obviously drives me nuts in terms of having those conversations.
Well, you brought up a ton of good points, so I want to unpack a couple of those. So the first point was this overemphasis on protein, and people saying, like, oh, I eat enough protein, right? So a common problem that I see once I start educating people on their distribution of macronutrients, one thing you'll notice in the performance space, if you're not aware, and this is to your audience, is your protein's going to be high, because you need it for repair work. Your body needs protein even outside of exercise. It is what builds your body, right? There's a component in your bone, all of your blood cells, your skin cells, everything in your body just maintain existence requires a baseline of protein. Now you start exercising a lot and you start breaking and tearing muscle tissue that needs to be repaired if you want to see growth. That elevates your protein need even higher. So if you don't eat enough protein, your body's going to get it from somewhere, right? And unfortunately, unlike adipose tissue or body fat, we don't have a storage form of amino acids. It's just our muscle tissue. So your body will take your muscle tissue and use it if it needs it, right? So we try to avoid that at all costs. So protein's going to be high. It's a lot of food to eat. In addition to that, as an athlete, your carbohydrate intake is going to be high. On the low end, we're talking like 3 grams per kilogram body weight, 45% total caloric intake coming from carbohydrates.
You're blowing people's minds right now. They're going, wait, what?
That is the low end. An ultra marathon runner is going to be eating about 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilo body weight. I mean, a ton. And then in between that 3 to 12 range exists the hybrid athlete, right? So a lot of the people we work with. So that's a lot of food. But what that leaves very little room for then is fat, unfortunately, right? Because we want carbs for performance. We want protein for repair work, right? That's what's going to drive performance. But to stay within this overarching bucket of total calories without gaining too much weight, we got to keep fat in check, unfortunately. So because fat now isn't maximized like protein and potentially carbohydrates, it's minimized. So we got to be a lot more careful. And if you don't know the basics, you might go to the store and say, well, I got to eat a bunch of protein, right? So I'm going to go buy a T-bone or I'm going to buy chicken thighs because they're cheaper than chicken breasts. What they don't realize unless they track that food is, well, now I just consumed twice my daily allotment of fat in attempts to reach my protein goal. And then they say, I'm not losing weight, I'm gaining weight. What's going on? I'm hitting my protein goal. Well, yeah, but you're also tripling your fat goal and overshooting your calories by like 500 to 1,000 every single day. Of course you're gaining weight. So being able to understand what their body needs and then understand what comes conveniently packaged in each type of food, right? Like, oh, where can I make these changes? Well, do you consume dairy? Yes. Are you doing whole milk? Well, yeah. Well, you probably don't have the fat budget for whole milk. So maybe switch to like 1% so that you can buy yourself some more fat later in the day. Are you eating chicken? Yes. Are you doing thighs or breasts? Thighs, because they're cheaper. Okay, well, that's a ton of fat. Like switch to breast, right? Because you're going to get fat from the meat, whether it's lean or not, you're going to get some. And then we need room for really healthy fat, like extra virgin olive oil, things like omega-3 fatty acids, which are literally essential, meaning you can't exist without them. So you have to plan in that small budget of fat, all of those other things. And that's a lot for people. And the more they understand the concepts, the more they think about that. So I'll give you an example. Oftentimes with military personnel, we see, what should I go out to the field with, right?
Right.
When I'm working with somebody, I turn the question back on them. I say, okay, knowing what you know now, having gone through my educational portion of my coaching, what do you think MREs give you and what do you think are lacking? If your whole fuel plan for a week in the field is going to be MREs, what key nutrients are we missing? They'll think and think. Be like, oh, well, those MREs don't have a bunch of fiber. I'm like, yeah, fiber, good. They're like, well, I don't think there's any omega-3 fatty acids. Like there's no fish in these MREs, right? I'm not getting fish oil pills. Like, yep, bingo, B, omega-3 fatty acids. And if you're going to be in the field for more than a week, they become even more important. And then let's say this guy is 250 and jacked. Well, I added up the 3 MREs and doesn't seem like it's going to hit my protein goal either. So you have to teach these individuals that MREs are awesome, but they're designed for the overall average warfighter, meaning small and large and everywhere in between, right? So there's going to be nuances if you really want to dial it in out in the field that you can bring out there with you. If you have the capability and means to do so, what's the harm in adding a relatively low amount of weight for a couple fish oil pills, even like 2 or 3 for the week, right? Packing some extra chow to provide you some more fiber, some more protein. And then you can mix and match. You can be like, well, I need protein and omega-3s. How about a packet of salmon? I get both, lightweight, right? And then what about fiber? Well, I can do some like chia seed squeeze pouches, or maybe some like superfood fruit pouches, and I can get some like good colorful fruits and vegetables. It's not that much added weight. I need the fuel anyways, so on and so forth. So that's where you take the concepts and you start applying them to these given situations. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's coaching. And that's, I think what you just said there in the last, 30 or 45 seconds was what people are looking for. And often when I'm having these conversations, they don't have a lot of patience for the understanding the fundamentals part. They, like I said before, they want the answer to the test.
Yes.
So you just gave them a few answers, like pack some salmon packets for some tuna, right? Some beef jerky,
You got to dangle a carrot.
Yeah, you got to put some stuff out there for them to do, and so I appreciate that, and I think probably people will too. So, just in terms of solutions there, and
can I actually add one more point to that, Scott, just before I forget it? Right. So this is kind of back to the dangling a carrot. You brought up an awesome point when you mentioned that a lot of people will understand every single thing there is to know about shooting mechanics and their firearm and all the nomenclature and the special upgrades they've made and so on and so forth, and very little about nutrition. And that's because they have a passion for shooting and all of that goes into it, right? And they don't have that same passion for nutrition. So one thing I really try to impose on everyone I work with is you need to find the why and then make nutrition fit into that. So if your why is, I want to be the best operator I can be so that my teammates can rely on me and I can overachieve any objective or obstacle, right? Well, in order to do that, I need to be extremely physically fit. Well, nutrition is clearly part of that process. Oh, well, now I'm passionate about nutrition, right? Because my why, even though it nothing to do directly with nutrition, it's impacted by nutrition. Same with firearms, right? If you want to be looking cool on Instagram, shooting really fast, doing 3-gun and winning competitions, well, you need to be physically fit for that, right? You don't want to be freaking 40% body fat, completely out of shape and can't run, a mile in, less than 18 minutes, right? You want to be in shape to do those things. Nutrition comes in. So take your passion, find a way nutrition applies to that, and it will help you get motivated to stay consistent and do the right things.
Yeah, it's a really good example. And I think the struggle that people have with this, again, I think it goes a little bit back to working in silos and not understanding how those concepts and then more of the detail, how they fit together. And you mentioned, being the shooting versus nutrition piece or the firearms versus nutrition piece. I guess it kind of comes down to, well, maybe this is the way I would describe it. I think when I think about it, I think about there's a very real consequence for a lot of your clientele, right?
Yes.
If they don't perform that skill really well, right? And they're not putting together what helps me perform that skill pretty well outside of the basic mechanics that I need to use while I'm doing the thing. Like how do I bring the nutrition or the fitness part into this? What's helping me get to this point? So yes, there is the act and the skill of having that firearm in front of you, getting rounds on target, and you understand all of those things. But how did you get to the place that you're at to actually bring up the firearm and get the rounds on target? Like, did you have to move there? Because if you had to move there needs to be probably a little bit of athleticism. And
absolutely.
Why, obviously, so why is that important? And what are the things I need to train in order to be more athletic? Okay, well, here's the things. Then I go back to the silo things. Well, I need to be faster. Okay, well, what helps you be faster? Well, I need to sprint more. Yeah. Okay. Well, what helps you sprint more? Well, I need to be, the overarching thing is I need to be more physically fit, but what does that mean, right? What does that actually mean? Well, I guess I need to have a little strength. I need to have a little power, and they don't understand those things and how those fit together. And so now we're getting into we get a little deeper into down into the flow chart of what makes you do what you do really well. And if they put the same urgency or, the same urgency and commitment level into the consequence of not wanting to suffer the consequences of not being able to perform at that time, then they have to peel back all the layers of the onion. And again, this just goes back to you're not thinking globally. You're thinking in a very isolated environment here. And that is very important. Like the things in isolation are important, but it goes back to your dietary success is never solely based on the food that you put in your mouth. There's so many other things. It's the same thing with, again,
Yes.
being able to move and shoot in the 3-gun, right? Like, it's not about just going out to the range every day. There's a million other things that need to be done. And again, going back, like, if I don't do this, I suck, right? Like, if I don't do this, and I got to do that, and I got to do this. And the thing that drops off, usually with that type of population, is going to be how they're training, but more specifically, it's the nutrition. It's just like, I just need to get, because I have all these other things in my way, right, that I have to have in my plan for the day in order to compete or, be skillful, in the range, or quote unquote operate, right? Whatever I got to do. And they're not planning around the things that are critical for sustained, right, and improved performance, and obviously nutrition being one of those things. And I think that's the hard part, is like, where am I going to fit this in? And again, they want answers to the test. Like, give me the plan, give me the template, man.
Yeah.
Because if I know how to do that, like, I know how to tick boxes, I can do that. Just tell me what to do to get to this result. And going back to the training thing and training being hard, right? Yeah, there's a physical component of that, but there's so much more understanding around the basic things that you can do. And when the basics are applied, you get a result. But at the same time, it is personal. There's there's personal that goes into that, the nuance, if you will. But if you take it to the nutrition side of the house, if the physical training part is hard and there's nuance there, I think you can put a 10x in front of the nutrition side. And people don't respect that, right? They don't respect that because they don't understand it. And this is the importance of having a coach, again, very specifically somebody that doesn't just talk about it, but actually knows about it at a deeper level, and also understands you and what you need to do, or what has some understanding of where you're coming from or where you need to get to. And again, getting the basics doesn't necessarily have to happen from that person, right? Or from that person. It could happen from somebody else that really doesn't have one earthly idea what your life on the job actually looks like, and they can be very helpful for you. But you also need to understand that there's going to be limitations to that as a client, right? Because there's limitations of that coach, and at some point you're going to have to move. If you want to move the needle forward, right, you're going to have to potentially leave that coach and go to another coach, right? And I wonder how that is for, like, you as a coach, getting people that have been coached before, and what are some of the common things that come up as they're entering into this environment with you and this new relationship with you that you're overcoming as a coach from previous coaching, right? In terms of belief systems, plans, all that kind of stuff. What comes up?
So typically I would say, if I have somebody that was previously coached nutritionally, it was by somebody that was definitely more interested in getting that person fast results, because that's what the person wanted. And they probably achieved the objective through not ideal means, right?
Yeah, caloric deficit first. Like, we're right into caloric deficit without any understanding.
A client comes to a coach and they say, I want to lose X amount of pounds. And the coach goes, I want your money. We can make it happen. They put them in that deficit. The person's miserable. They reach their weight. And then what happens once they stop working with that individual? Their weight goes right back up because they learned absolutely nothing. So I'm very cautious with who I take on as a client. I'm very fortunate working with Modern Athlete that we get people that understand that, and they understand and value performance, typically more so than the aesthetic piece. So when I initially talk to somebody and I tell them, this is going to be a slow and controlled process, right? We're going to lose, at most 1 to 2 pounds a week. And that's after we figure out your maintenance calories and we put you into a strategic deficit. It's not going to be lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks deal. Like, that's just, if you expect that, like, we're going to stop that right here. Like, I will not, because my reputation as a coach depends on long-term success. I want people to think 10 years down the road, when they're still successful, like, oh man, like what Erik taught me was super beneficial, right? And I think that makes it hard as a nutrition coach, is because a lot of the messaging and things that I'm teaching people, it's so that they can live healthy when they're 50, 60, 70, 80. Like, I'll probably be dead by when some of these people are ready to give me a testimonial. They're like, man, I maintained a good body weight, didn't have heart disease, didn't get diabetes. I had a long, healthy life. Like, I think I'm going to give Erik a 5-star Google review. You know what I mean? Because results aren't always fast. I'd say when it comes to fast results, what clients will typically notice is, like, if they were completely under consuming food and under consuming carbohydrate, they're going to get a performance bump right out of the gate. They're going to feel like an animal in the gym. Like I had one client tell me, dude, I feel like I'm on steroids. It's unbelievable, And it's like, yeah, like that is some quick results you can definitely, notice. And there's more examples, but a lot of it is going to come down the road through consistency. And to your point about it being 10x more difficult, I say that a lot to colleagues, that it's like a gripe of mine about being a nutrition coach because people aren't getting as quick a results as maybe like a strength and conditioning coach might get with a performance result. It makes it harder to maintain that reputation. In addition to that, a person can go a week without training, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, that might actually even benefit their body, that rest week, right? Mm-hmm. But if you go a week without eating or a week of just eating complete trash, man, the effects are enormous.
Right.
So because you have to be so Johnny on the spot with your nutrition all the time, it does. You train maybe once a day, twice if you're, getting after it. You eat 3 times a day, if not more. And you got to be on it. So that is why the approach needs to be slow. The changes you make have to be slow. You got to change one thing at a time and really let it sink in, let the habit form and get used to it. Then attack the next thing, because that's what's going to help somebody sustain that change for a long period of time. So one strategy, depending on the client, it might be, all right, diet's not looking perfect, right? There's a lot of areas we can improve. Let's start with breakfast. Let's get breakfast completely dialed in. Let's get the timing dialed in. Let's get the macronutrient composition dialed in. And let's get a couple different options so you don't have to eat the same thing every single day, right? Like, let's throw a parfait with granola in the mix. Let's do pancakes. Let's do eggs with, roasted yams, bell peppers, onions. Make it sexy because that's Saturday and you've got time, right? And once we have this variety and we've experimented, like, oh, didn't like that one. All right, let's put that in place of that. Oop, like that one. We get this repertoire going. Now that individual can go back into the wild after my, love, care, and support and be successful with breakfast. But then after breakfast is dialed, we'll attack lunch and attack dinner and attack snacks, right? But we have to start somewhere and start slow because not everything's going to take, right? You're going to throw a lot of stuff at the wall because everyone's preferences are different. Their cultural backgrounds are different. Their lifestyle is different. Some people have kids, some people don't have kids, right? Some people are married, some people aren't married. Somebody's wife might be cooking for them or husband, and some people are single and doing all the cooking themselves. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration when we're working through a plan. That's why I like teaching the planning process so that you can think about all these things. So for example, it's Friday. I have already thought about what next week is going to look like. I know what my work client calls are, right? I know when I'm on dad duty. I know when my scheduled workout times are going to be. And I've planned my nutrition around that already. So I know when I go grocery shopping on Sunday, I know exactly what my meals are going to be because I thought through everything. And in addition to that, right? And I know how much time I have Sunday to prep all the food I need, right? That's huge. You need to know how much time you have to prep. Because if you have this huge elaborate meal plan and you go out in your kitchen and try to cook it and it's freaking 10 p.m. Sunday and you got to be in bed, you're like, oh man, well, failed.
I'll figure it out tomorrow.
Exactly. Right. I'll just stop at 7-Eleven and grab something quick, right? So that level of planning is necessary for that reason. But in addition to that, I have contingencies, right? Because everyone knows plan A typically doesn't work out. There's going to be things that come up next week that I did not plan for. So I've got my pantry completely organized and stacked with backup plans. I've got various snack foods in my car, in my gym bag, ready to go at a moment's notice, right? As a complete emergency backup. In addition to that, now I know I'm at a level that might be nutritionally above some people that are just starting out, but I feel very confident walking into any convenience store, any airport, any fast food restaurant, and I know I can build a PCC healthy plate. And that is what I try to emphasize and teach everybody I work with so they can have that same level of skill and understanding, because then you'll never get caught off guard, right? Oh, plan A didn't work. I've already eaten my contingency meal in my car and I forgot to restock, but there's a gas station right there and I know I'm going to grab maybe some pistachios. That's going to give me some calories, some healthy fat, some fiber. I'm going to grab a protein source. Maybe that looks like a drinkable protein shake. And then I'm going to grab some starchy carb because, I just worked out or whatever. And that could be, you name it, some bread, some freaking
tons of stuff. It's any number of things.
Right?
There.
Rice Krispie treats, all the good stuff. But they have that knowledge of, okay, I need PCC. Maybe there's some fresh fruit at that convenience store. Ideally, I feel like most gas stations, C-stores, they're going to have bananas, apples, oranges. They may not look the greatest, right? They maybe have been sitting there for a little bit, but you're still going to get that fiber. You're going to get some of those vitamins and minerals, not empty calories. And you can build that healthy plate on the go. So understanding that and being able to think on the spot and on the fly, it's just like the tactical world in any job, right? If you're in a highly chaotic environment, right? You're trained to take a deep breath and walk through your training and think through and not be, completely discombobulated. Nutrition's the same way. If you're understanding like, oh, I forgot my lunch today, what do I do? You pause, you take a deep breath and you go, okay, well, for lunch I had this packed and it followed these principles. I'll just go here. I'm out the money, but I'm not out the nutritional benefit. I got to pay for it because I messed up and forgot my lunch, but my nutrition and my performance isn't going to suffer as a result.
Still taken care of. I love that. You just, again, some really practical examples. You mentioned like the convenience store food, and I get that. That's probably one of the more common questions I get. I'm out on the road. I'm teaching classes. I've got, whatever. I got the kids' soccer games, and man, I'm running low on fuel. What can I get at the local, Circle K or 7-Eleven or Arco or whatever it is, that fulfills this need? I actually have like in my lists or on my notes, I have lists of stuff like, hey, here's a list of all kinds of things that fulfill these categories. Like, be careful, look at labels, on certain stuff, but here you go, man. Go check this out. Those are, I think, the things that people want, right? They want, oh yeah, that'll solve my problem. But you went back to the planning. Here's the other thing about planning, particularly with nutrition. And again, because it's a 24/7 deal, right? You can't take a week off. You can't. Like that can't even be in your mindset. Like you have to understand that, okay, there's a week where I'm deployed in the case that you're working with. Like that should be part of the plan, right? That should be part of the plan. Then there should be a plan for that. Again, the old adage of, failure to plan is going to guarantee failure kind of thing, or whatever that saying is. But I look at it this way too. You're kind of mentioned some things about how you think, how you operate. And I think about like these guys, like a firefighter, for example. I don't know who would do this, or a law enforcement officer. Like I would think before you go out on shift, right? Before you go 10-8, you're in the locker room, you're getting changed. There's a certain checklist of things that happens, like even in the locker room, right? Like, okay.
PCCs and PCIs, right?
Yeah, I got my stuff. Like, do my batteries work? Is everything where it's supposed to be, right? Do I have my gun today, right? Is it loaded, right? Does my weapon light work? Does my dot work, right? Do I have my cuffs? Like what's on if I'm wearing kit, like does everything where it needs to be? I got that, cool, I'm good. Then I get to my vehicle, right? Checking my vehicle, make sure I got my stuff, my rifle maybe sits in the trunk or in a lockbox or whatever. I check my stuff. Do I have everything? It's all there. And that just becomes a routine, right? Yep. It's just, this is what we do. It's not a plan anymore. This is normal. It's not a plan. It's just like, this is how I operate, right? No pun intended. Like, this is just what I do. So going back to like weekends and things like that, like on Sunday is adulting day, right? For us, sometimes it happens for CC and I. Sometimes it happens on Saturday, but it's often Sunday. And it's just the way we operate. And I don't love it. But it's just what we do, right? Exactly. You get up, right? You make breakfast, right? If we were ahead of the plan a little bit, and we feel really good about this, if you started laundry on a Saturday and all you have to do is take it out of the dryer and fold it on Sunday, which is the worst part of doing laundry for me, right? Like at least you're one step ahead of the game. Then, then we go to our local shopping store that we go to, or grocery store is going to be Trader Joe's. That's what we've been doing for probably the last 2 years now.
TJ's.
Yeah, we go in there, right? We don't even make eye contact or say a word to one another when we walk in there.
Implicit
I grab the cart. Before I'm even in the door with the cart, she's already in the cold box on the veggie section. She's grabbing stuff. I go get the stuff on the dry section of the veggies or whatever. And it just starts going in the cart, right? And the next thing is the meat area, right? And I'm just loading up. How many packages do we have any in the freezer? No, we're good. Okay, good. So I know how many packages to buy, because this is just what we do, right? We're in and out of Trader Joe's in less than 20 minutes. We go home. Then it's while I'm putting stuff away, she's already meal prepping for the rest of the week. We already know. And it sounds like a little boring maybe. And people are looking at that like, dude, that's not how I want to spend my Sunday. Well, when are you going to do it then?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, when are you going to, you tell me, that's my plan. And you don't have to adopt my plan. Like, and I'm certainly don't have to adopt my grocery list, right? We have our things. We figured it out because we put it into practice. And there's things that she wants to get. I'm like, I don't eat that. She knows that. So I get the things that I'm going to get, whatever else. But we're in and out of there. And it's just the way it goes. And so like on Mondays, we almost always kind of eat the same things. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, it just gets swapped. It's like my workouts, right? Like, hey, I had a really hard day on this day, so I moved this workout to this, whatever. Like, that's how you operate. And the only way to get there is to take that slow approach, not try to change too many things at one time so you know it's actually working. Yes. Understand there's going to be failure in that process, but the discovery that happens in the failure in that process is where the real rewards happen. But more importantly, and this just brings it back to advocating for you and for all the nutrition coaches out there, is that the magic is getting somebody to finally get there. And there's no greater reward. Like we'll run, like we have an InBody here, so we do body comp and whatever else, and people like to do those things. Or somebody reaches their weight loss goal, or somebody reaches a new PR or something like that. There's always high fives and congrats and whatever. But there's no better reward or paycheck when somebody comes back after kind of fighting through that process, the ups and downs, and you having to be the emotional punching bag as a coach sometimes, like, this isn't working, the plan isn't working. Well, dude, you're kind of not executing the plan. So, you know, like maybe try this, and you get them to the stage where like, dude, I lost that weight. I hit that PR, like I've got this thing going. I went on that trip, like, and I worked out 2 days. I've never worked out on my vacation before, but I felt compelled to do it, and I fit it in. It was part of the plan, right? It was part of the plan. All these things start falling into place. To me, there's no greater reward as a coach when you're just like, you trusted the process, you got through it, and now you have these skills and tools under your belt, for you, so that you can be independent at some level. And it's at that point where that's when the real twisting of dials and things. Oh, you wanted to have that supplement talk? Maybe we talk about that supplement talk now. How can we eke out another 0.5% or 1% or whatever? We didn't start there. And again, this just goes back to, again, that person that comes in and checks their gear and then goes to the next thing and checks their gear. When they arrive on scene, there's a order of operations that they do. And it's not when you say habit, like I look at it as habit, but it's just like it's now downloaded onto the motherboard, and it's just what you do. And if you get thrown out of that loop, you have this tools and skills to be like, I know how to fix this real quick. This is not a problem for me. The more important part about it is, and this is where the coach kind of helps, I think, up front with going through the failure and discovery process, is the recognition of being ahead of it, right? Like I know how to be ahead of this game, so that the psychological and emotional impacts that drive these weird behaviors, I used that word before, weird, don't happen. They kind of disappear, right? Yes. You're not making these wild decisions on this isn't working, or I failed here, and now I just throw the baby out with the bathwater. The arms go up. The term is I've gone off the rails or whatever else. And actually knowing that maybe that does happen. You go to that social event and man, you ate all the cake and you ate all the hot dogs and you did all the stuff, and go, and they come back and they go, dude, I felt like shit. I feel like total shit. Like I ate that stuff. I got outside of my normal operation, and I'm paying for it now. I don't want to go back there. Yes. I don't want that. And so they can easily jump right back in. I'm on a little bit of a diatribe here because nutrition coaching is that. It's that thing. It's not the same as performance coaching when you're looking at the fitness side, where you can kind of see things ahead of time and you can show it to people. In nutrition coaching, you can't show it. You can only know as the coach that it's going to happen to them, and try and help them navigate so that they don't fail as hard, or they don't suffer as much, or they're kind of in a little bit of a different mindset. But the reality of it is you have to let them go through it. It's just like failing on a set, you dick that up, dude, but you're going to get another opportunity at this, right? This is not the end of the world. And it's much easier to do in the fitness side of the house than it is on the nutrition side of the house, because they have no idea yet. They have no idea. You do, and you can almost take a read. Like, you do this long enough, I'm sure for you, you go through the intake, you get people going, and you're just like, this person's going to run into problems at about week 2, right? They're going to run into problems in week 2. And I know what this is going to feel like and this is going to look like. I'm ready for it. They're not. So, what can I do to help them navigate through it? But the reality of it is they're going to have to fall down and get back up. And it's way more falling down and getting back up on the nutrition train than it is on the fitness train. And it's so hard for people to, this comes to, there's sort of a question in this, but this comes to the value of a nutrition coach and where people put their value the time and finance, and where they're putting their focuses in and buying the new gadget, buying the new device that they wear to track some data that they don't know how to do, they don't know what to do with or whatever else. The supplements, the $400 of supplement containers they have sitting on their kitchen counter or whatever else. And they're putting all this value right into that. And there could be, you could spend that money so much better and make such a better investment in your health, both short, long-term, and the performance aspects, by pulling back for a second and just go, maybe I just need somebody to help me with my personal situation for a little while, right? And if I am as independent as I think I am, this will be short term. My experience with that is that happens about 50% of the time, right? We just need to give you a little. You mentioned like right and left parameters. We just need to give you some gutters here. So sometimes that's all people need, and sometimes people come in thinking all I need is some right and left gutters, and then a year later, right, they're still coming to the nutrition tune-up appointment on a bi-weekly or weekly or monthly basis or whatever, because they recognize the value that exists there and how it impacts all the other things in our life. So that's you gave me an opportunity to just kind of promote nutrition coaches everywhere that do a really good job at this stuff. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand about working with somebody like you is it is a lot of work, and it is very important to have that relationship and know that, and you won't know it till it happens, that your coach knows a lot more than you think you do, and you want all these little nutrition tidbits, right? But it's so much more than that, man. So anyway, that's my diatribe and speech for the day.
No, it was great, and I mean, you raised a lot of great points, and that's the difference. That's what ChatGPT and a general typical nutrition coach isn't typically going to be able to offer you. You as a human being are so unique, and your coach recognizes that. And they're going to take all of those unique aspects about you, your habits, your tendencies. They're going to have you tweak some of those to make the diet change work. They're going to offer you food preferences that you actually like, right? That's a big reason I don't write just standalone meal plans for people, because you might not like that food, right? And if you're a disciplined person, you'll eat it for a period of time because you're disciplined, but you learned nothing. And eventually you're going to get sick of it and just go back to the way you were eating.
Yeah, so it works until it doesn't. It works until it doesn't, because it's not going to forever.
Right. And if you don't understand what the nutrition coach that made the meal plan did, if they didn't know, okay, that was, 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates and 40 grams of protein, and then all of this fibrous foods with 4 different colors for these reasons. Oh, that was high in calcium and blah, blah, blah. Well, you learn nothing. So you're going to, again, not be able to replicate that without replicating the exact same meal indefinitely forever. So that's why I really emphasize, and I'm very passionate about teaching people these basics about nutrition. And then once I feel like they at least grasp, a little bit, then having them start to apply it. Like I quiz them a lot. Like, okay, now that you know this, what would be a good snack prior to that workout? Or what would be a great meal to bring on shift? Because you're only going to have a cooler and it's freaking 120 degrees outside. You're in Arizona. And it's things like that where then I thought I knew it, but then when I had to apply it, I realized I didn't know it. So then we go back and we walk through each one of those scenarios, right? Like, oh, okay, well, now that you're thinking through it, like try this, that, or the other, right? Depending on the given scenario.
That makes good logical sense, but people will play that over in their head and they'll figure out how to justify why they don't need it or how they are doing it well. That's the frustrating part of being a coach.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, I know you feel that same pain. That said, and just kind of wrapping this up here, because I could go all day long with you, I'm sure, about coaching, and then we could dig into some really deep rabbit holes on the science of nutrition. Where does it apply? Like you kind of brought something up earlier when we were talking about your pathway through the education process, and the research meets and the science meets application, and having a good understanding of that research and science underneath you so that you understand how to actually apply it. Because there's the knowledge and wisdom, right? Maybe is how you look at that.
Yep.
Like, I have all this information, right? That's knowledge. Wisdom is knowing when and where to apply it. And so, as people are seeking coaches or seeking nutrition information, I think there's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of influencers, and they're very compelling, right? And there's a lot of good information coming in there. And there's some very smart, very good people at doing that. And I often have conversations with clients that have, they listen to a podcast, and they listen to a good one from a good person, and then they're like, oh, I heard the answer to my problem. Well, did you? Like, what was the answer? What did you hear? And then I have to go, well, where did you hear that from? And like, oh yeah, I listened to that one too. Let me reframe this for you as in the context that you need to think about. So I think, like, just with today and how you handled this conversation, this was, to me, like true nutrition coaching. This is true talk from a true nutrition coach. I think a lot of people want to cram things down people's throats. They want to give them the tick list of things that they need to do, and there isn't one in this. It's more conceptual, right? And I think that's a tough thing for people to kind of get. Again, again, the concept of the big rocks, the concept of the PCC. Like, oh yeah, I get it. I should have color on my plate or whatever. Yeah, but do you? Like, what does that mean for you, right?
Right.
Kind of thing. Like these bigger concepts, and then wanting to dig deeper in it. And I love what you said there about being passionate about it. If you're passionate about your performance, you're passionate about your teammates and showing up for them, whatever, it would behoove you, and it will benefit you and everybody. And you said this at the beginning. I know when I prioritize my health, which includes my nutrition, my fitness, my mental, emotional, health, I know that benefits everybody around me, not just me. So if you thought about it outside of that, maybe you could be a little bit more passionate about it. And the same way you would worry about showing up to a fire without your boots, right? Or without your jacket, and how that would impact, obviously, you, but everybody else around you. Same thing here on the nutrition and fitness side. Like, how are you showing up? Right? Can you confidently say, right, you understand the concepts and you're applying the concepts enough to be able to show up in the best possible physical, mental, emotional, nutritional situation you can to do your job or perform on demand, and not just for you so that you can say that you did it, but for the people around you. And to your point about plan A never really working out, you can do all the right things in the world, and Murphy's Law is going to happen. Something's going to happen. Are you ready for that next thing? Do you have another gear to grab, right?
Yep.
And what could that be? And how do these things, in that, again, that flow chart, as it kind of trickles down, like, where am I prioritizing my time right now, and where could I get the most value that impacts everything across the line when you look at it? Interviewed a guy the other day. We were talking about a very specific concept, or we were talking about CQB, which is really volatile, subject matter, on the internet or whatever. This guy's qualified, right, and competent, and
I'd say.
his name's Charlie Ross with Hades Consulting, and the way he basically put it is, I think you can kind of put everything on a chart, like what flows across all the things, right? Like, and fitness, right, and shooting in this particular thing is a constant across patrol, teams, whatever you happen to be doing. So obviously a larger chunk of the time and the effort and the finance or whatever it is that you're spending should be spent in those things, in what takes up less room on that pie chart or, bar graph or whatever else is. And it's interesting. Fitness is like kind of like, oh yeah, you got to be fit. You got to be fit. It's interesting how some people just completely disregard it. But my point being is, like, I got to be fit. Yeah, what are the things that go into the fitness, and how are you prioritizing those things, whether it be your training or your nutrition? So not trying to oversell it. I'm just saying this is the one that people seem to struggle with the most, and it's because it's the most personal, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the most misunderstood for so many reasons, which you highlighted. So,
and I think, if you don't mind me adding, that oftentimes people are so scared that they're not going to be able to enjoy what they're eating because they have this boxed in mindset that it's going to be like maybe some previous diet they've tried that's so restrictive where they were constantly hungry. They didn't enjoy the food. It might have worked, but they just don't want to put themselves through that again. My clients eat pizza and cheeseburgers and French fries.
It's in the plan.
Yeah, because they know what constitutes that meal. They know what goes into it. They know how to adjust it if necessary, and they know how to adjust their day around that planned mealtime. I'm going out with the boys after work and we're going to have a beer and some pizza, right? Already adjusted my nutrition earlier in the day. I can eat that guilt-free. Your diet can contain all of these wonderful things and be so unrestrictive that it's nothing to shy away from. The discipline and the struggle comes into your sacrifice of time. Because unless you have the financial means to have somebody prepare all of your food for you and grocery shop for you, it means you're going to sacrifice some of your time somewhere in a week
100%
to get ready for, to be on top of your nutrition. And I think if you're okay with that, if you're okay accepting that, you will 100% be successful in your nutrition journey, given the right tools. But if you're not okay with sacrificing time, then there's a deeper issue that you need to work on before you start working on your nutrition.
Oh, that's really powerful. You don't have a knowledge issue. You don't have a nutrition issue at this point. You have a commitment problem. Right. And that's really what it is. And that goes back to connecting to your why. Right. And sifting through that and sitting with that for a while. That's a very, very solid point. Just taking it over to modern athlete right now. And you kind of talked about who you're dealing with. And obviously there was a ton there with how you deal with clients and what to expect if you're to work with like Erik. Right. And jumping into nutrition coaching or going through like a consultation, you're not going to get the magic answer, right? There is no one size fits all that Erik's going to hand you or email you or whatever else. I'm just curious about like what's going on with nutrition coaching at Modern Athlete, and is this like included in it? Do you treat it as kind of a separate service? Like maybe just the business structure before we wrap up. Absolutely.
So we've got a couple different tiers of offerings for my nutrition services. The lowest tier is just going to be starting out with the nutrition guide, right? If you're unsure and you just kind of want to get a knowledge base, I've got several nutrition guides out, with a new one going to be coming out hopefully by the end of this year, early next year, that kind of combines them all together. But that will be a good starting point. Now, as much as I would love for you to buy my guide, right? Like, it's still just information, and I can only provide so much application insight into a guide, right, because the guide's meant for anybody that picks it up.
Created for the masses. Yeah,
exactly. So the next tier up is going to be Warfighter Elite. That's a subscription-based service where you're getting customized training, right? A level up from the standard Warfighter. In addition to that, we have me coming on once every other week for open office hours. If you have any nutrition questions, I'm there for you for an hour. Ask away. I will help you apply all of those concepts, right? I'll get those questions answered. In addition to that, the weeks I'm not on, we've got one of our strength coaches on. So if you have fitness questions, you can talk to them and ask them. And then the upper tier is going to be one-to-one coaching or 90 Unchained. So one-to-one coaching, you're working with me directly, either for a one-off a la carte session or a 3-month program, or you're doing 90 Unchained where you're getting both strength and conditioning coaching and me together simultaneously to help achieve an objective that you have. So those are the offerings we have right now. We're going to have some exciting stuff coming out next year. I'll obviously wait for, one of the other guys to plug that. But for nutrition, that's where we're at right now. So you can find me over at Modern Athlete, on the website, on the Instagram. Shout out if you have any questions during the weekly Q&As, and we'll do our best to get those questions answered for you.
Yeah, I love that. I think a couple takeaways. First off, my model here is nearly identical, right? And why? Because it works. And how do I know it works? This is the old State Farm thing. I say this almost on every podcast. seen a few things, so I know a few things, right? And what people, how people adopt, different things into their life. Again, the pathway to fitness is way easier. There's way less barriers of entry, I think, to get people in. Sometimes people just need to be kind of led to the trough, right?
Yes.
So to speak, and like, hey, where might I fit into this? And then having different options based on all kinds of things, like what's your level of need, what's your financial status, those kind of things. I think it's super smart, and that's what people should expect. The other thing that they should expect is they should expect that personal interaction. What I would warn people of is if you're having you're out there searching for nutrition advice and you think the answer is in a template and that's what you're being sent, that is a red flag. I'm telling you right now. I would say there's probably one population of people where that probably works a little bit better, and it's going to be for the novice bodybuilder, right? The novice, not the advanced bodybuilder, but the novice bodybuilder, whatever that means, right? And that being like, here's what you need to eat in terms of macros, right?
Yep.
And then that constant, like, we're just going to adjust macros. That is a very temporary plan. And what you're probably going to find at the end of that, as the novice who's doing that for maybe the first or the second time, is when you get to the end of that thing, and there will be an end, because there's a very defined date, time, hour, that you're trying to peak for. You're going to find yourself in a hole that you're going to need to dig yourself out of. And there's no template for that, right? You're probably going to wind up needing a true nutrition coach at that point. So, again, same thing with the planting the flags and diatribes, right? And whatever, like, this might work for a little while, but what are you learning along the way in terms of how to make adjustments when it doesn't work for you anymore? And it won't. So going back to the research and hey, this worked in a lab in this 3-week study on rats or in a petri dish, or for this group of college-age males that was available for this study at this time that this researcher was doing, including the person that was working on their master's degree, that was also working with 200 other people, that was reporting to an advisor who had to manage all those 200 people, that came up with these numbers and whatever, and this is research, man. It got published, right? And now, but how did that look if we kept doing that for another year? What would this actually look like, and how does that apply to me? My point in saying all that is there is no one size fits all. You have to have people come together. You have to be working with somebody that understands what I just said, right? Because they've been there and done that. I've done a little bit of that, and we just talked with a group about this, like, specific to exercise research, right? And how it just gets completely blown out of proportion, and people throw the baby out with the bathwater, as I said before, and like, oh, this is the new way. No, it could be a way. The research is promising, was the quote that I heard you use. Like, hey, it seems promising, but we got things to figure out here. So going back to, people that are searching for coaches or potentially shopping around. The other thing that I know with you guys is, like, you're giving them this opportunity to meet with you guys, right? To get a feel, like, for who your coaches are and what it is, how are they delivering their information, the quality of their information, the back and forth. There's an opportunity for them when they can get into this, on the weekly call or monthly call, I forget the frequency there, but where they get to interact, like, who is this team? Any coach worth their weight in salt that's trying to sell you something, or that you're thinking about investing in, should be doing that. A piece of advice for anybody out there that's doing that. So again, one more time, if they want to get involved with that and kind of get maybe a little bit deeper, whether it's through the guide, the weekly calls, the one-on-one, or adding on the 90 Unchained with the fitness stuff, where do they go?
Just go to Modern Athlete. Yeah, Modern Athlete Strength Systems. I mean, you can even type in, I think right now, fortunately, we're becoming more well-known. You can probably just Google Modern Athlete, and ours will be the first one that pops up. But you can find all of our services provided there. Also, follow us on the social platforms. We're always giving, updates on new programs that are coming out, discounts for certain programs, all the latest and greatest news, like you're getting your news from anyways.
Right.
Find us on the socials, and we'll give you all the updates necessary.
Yeah, just a compliment on the socials. I think you guys do a fantastic job with that, with all the stuff and all the socials that are out there. I found personal value as both a consumer and also as a professional sort of in the space. I recommend you guys all the time with, hey, you should follow this stuff. I would not have learned about you specifically without it. So again, going back to the power of social media, I think there's some really good stuff there. I'm really impressed by the team, and I've had nothing but really, really good interactions with you. And like I said, I could continue this one for another 2 hours, but I think we'd probably lose people if we haven't already.
Yeah.
And
we'll
all
have
that.
to do another session then.
Yeah, man, and that's usually that's what I was going to ask, and that is like, hey, man, I would love to reconnect with you at some point, and maybe get into maybe deeper level into some of these specific topics, because I always just enjoy doing it, and I think I think the people that are listening right now, if they're like I said, if they're still here, they trust that if I'm going to bring a coach on wherever they're coming from, the only reason I would bring them on is because I think they can provide value, and you've certainly done that today, and I really appreciate that. From a professional and a personal level. So thanks for taking time out on your.
It is a passion of mine, so I am always happy to discuss nutrition. I could do it also all day long. I would say to the viewers listening, if we do another episode, maybe drop it in the comments what topics you'd like to learn more about. 100%. And if we can see a recurring theme, maybe we can cover down on that in depth. And that would be a good way to kind of help you all out.
I agree with that 100%. I am very fortunate that I do get feedback, both in comments, but more in DMs, like private messages. People want to get into discussions about what we talked about, and I will certainly share that with you. And if there's an opportunity for us to fulfill some needs and wants from people out there, I would love that. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you being open to that and the consideration. Best of luck to you, Erik, in the very near and long future. I'm certain we will be speaking again before too long, whether that's in private or publicly like this. Best of luck to the Modern Athlete team. Like I said, I love what you guys are doing. It seems like things are going really well right now, which makes me happy, right? As a coach and a person in the world that wants to see, I can really connect with people that are just trying to leave the world or the place they're in better than when they found it. You guys are certainly doing that. It's a super talented, professional, and motivated group of guys, and that's important. And I think that's what other dudes and women are trying to connect with. So you guys keep doing your thing, man. And we'll talk to you soon.
Brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you.